So can you make me a host, please, Jackson? I did provide you, I understand just tonight, so you probably haven't had too much of an opportunity to look at, but I did provide you with some other townships that have pretty robust zoning codes, just to look at them from both the design standards as well as the schedule of uses that they have, just again to give us some idea where we might want to go. So I'm not sure if you can see that or not. So what I've recommended doing so far based upon our discussion is I've separated the business districts into 3 business districts. One is the B1 district. That's the predominantly the area up along West 130th and 303. The B2 district would be a light business district is what I've termed that. That would be the West 130th Boston section of the town. And then B3 would be the Hinckley Town Center district, which would be downtown Hinckley. I started to work through possible permitted and conditional uses. And again, we can break these down one by one. I'll just give you an overview of what my thoughts were, and then we can work through it. Any changes, so the B2 and the B3, what I did first is I moved everything from the B2 over to the B3. So we started with consistency across those 2. And then I redlined any changes I've made relative to the existing B2 for the B3. So what I've done so far is I've kept offices and professional corporate as permitted within the town center. Retail less than 12,000 square feet retained as permitted within town center. Retail over 12,000 square feet not permitted within town center, or again within the B2, which it currently is. Professional services, that would be, hair salons, those types of services would be permitted within the business B3 district. Banks would be permitted. Lawn and garden would be conditional. Drive-ups and drive-throughs would be conditional. Outdoor displays associated with permitted or conditional would be conditional. Restaurants would be permitted. Bars and taverns consistent would be conditional. Moving to automobile service stations, that would be, I think currently it is a conditional use within the B1. It is not permitted in the B2. And what I've suggested is making conditional within the B2 district, which would be the West 130th, Boston corridor, and then not permitting it in town center, which would be consistent with the current regulations for town center. The reason I'm proposing that change is because I don't know that anything up in the B2 district near West 130th in Boston would preclude the idea of having some sort of gas station there. So that's why I threw that out there as a possibility for us to look into expanding the code, not just contracting what's permitted within different areas.
One question that I'd have there,
Go ahead.
And I didn't want to interrupt right away. Where do you foresee the Buzzards Cove property in this? Is this B3 or B2?
And that will be a discussion that we need to have. And if I can, let me jump.
And I guess the only reason I'm asking is because I'm looking at the automobile service stations. Since we weren't allowed to change the text, and they were looking to put in basically just an auto repair shop in Wolney's property. Now, if it stays B2, then we could end up with the same thing in bus garage or something right down the street from the Metro Parks. And certainly would be problematic for Echo Glen. That's why, like, to me, if we're going to talk about what's going to be permitted and what's not going to be permitted, I think for me personally, I'm going to feel better if I know where we're actually keeping Buzzards Cove.
Okay, Buzzards Cove will be a question mark, and here's why. When we jump down, and I'll jump down and then we can come back up. When we jump down to outdoor recreation was not permitted in the B2 or B3 district. Buzzards Cove has a driving range in it that is very likely considered, and a miniature putt-putt, both of which would be considered outdoor recreation. So if we don't, what I suggested was making a conditional use within the B2 for outdoor recreation and then putting Buzzards Cove in the B2 district. Currently, Buzzards Cove is in the B1, where it's a conditional use within the. So where do we go with Buzzards Cove? I think part of that's going to depend on where do we want outdoor recreation, because I think that they need to follow one another. When you look at the map for Buzzards Cove, it has pretty significant riparian setbacks, and a large portion of that property is almost unusable if we don't allow outdoor recreation on that parcel. So it's something that we need to consider when we look at Buzzards Cove, which is why I'm not sure. I think it could fit within the B3 district. I think it could fit within the B2. The question is, do you want it within the B3 and then allow outdoor recreation within the B3, which I think would be a little unusual to see in town center.
And I know it isn't necessarily the goal, but we could create a legal non-conforming. It's existing.
We could, but remember that if they were to cease operations for 2 years, they would lose that legal non-conforming. And then there would be real problems for that parcel because, again, there's so many riparian setbacks on that parcel that it would be hard to continue to have some sort of business there and utilize the parcel without having outdoor recreation. But that is, you're right, a possibility. What are you thinking, Mr. Marzullo?
I'm concerned with really what could potentially go in there as being part of the new B2 or out of it being the current B1. I mean, we could have some very disruptive businesses that could go in there very easily for the surrounding properties, either conditional or permitted uses right now.
So if we put it in the B2 district and we removed the automobile service station, so we have now reduced the uses of that parcel because it's now in the B2. And we've removed the automobile service station from B2, which would also then unfortunately probably take away from there.
So it's problematic because now we're looking at the Boston Road.
Correct. Now, Boston Road currently does not allow for automobile service stations. I will say that. So we will not be taking away anything that they currently have on Boston.
Correct. But if we moved over to B3, the township, town center, then whatever development guidelines we develop for that town center would also apply there, which would not necessarily be a negative as people do want to come in and develop that space. Right. Or it just remains Buzzards Cove until the end of time.
And I still feel that if you put it in the B3, you probably need to make outdoor recreation a conditional use within the B3.
And I think that makes more sense, moving the outdoor regulation to conditional to B3 and moving Buzzards Cove into B3 than it does allowing it to move over to B2 and not allowing outdoor recreation in the B3.
Currently, there's not outdoor recreation within B3.
That's what I'm saying. But if we expand it into B3, and then we can lump Buzzards Cove into B3 as well. I think that makes more sense than having a random business district that isn't tied to the downtown business district that close. I mean, honestly, it's closer to the downtown business district than anything else.
Yeah.
And
I would say it's not historic as town center is, but
yeah, it may not be as historic, but it's certainly in the heart of the township. And if we're going to have the opportunity to create development regulations as to the aesthetic, I think we would certainly want that to be under that same aesthetic requirement as the historic district.
I'm just going to change.
That's just my personal opinion. I'd love to hear the rest of the board's input on that one.
I think it's an option. There's other things to take into consideration with the B2 as worded today in terms of parking and just the overall intent of it. But in the discussion, I think all of this is an option.
So I think we're going to have more of a discussion on that as well, because at least right now, unless we go with design standards, I'm envisioning that we would mostly carry over the requirements of the B2 into the B3. And then over time, those could be refined. But everything that, the building sizes, the parking space requirements, where the parking is located, everything was written really for town center for the B2. So I think that could relatively easily be moved over and utilized for both B2 and B3, unless we're going to tackle the design standards at the same time. And then again, zoning commissions over time could work on refining each one of those separately. So, Mr. Marzullo, you're leaning towards maintaining as a possibility a conditional use of automobile service stations within the B2. You don't see a problem with that one.
In the B2,
Correct.
I mean,
Because there's a gas station right across the street from B2, so I don't see that there's.
yeah, I mean, I think in that portion of the township, it kind of makes sense, actually.
I think so.
I mean, to as you pointed out, there's a gas station literally across the street. I don't imagine another one going in straight away. That's for sure.
No. Okay. So again, continuing on, small power equipment stays a conditional use within B1. That doesn't change. Churches would be a conditional use within all three districts. Libraries would be conditional within all three. The next two are item food for thought here. Schools, private or public. That's currently conditional in both of our business districts. I wondered whether we should maintain that as a condition within the B3 district or we should remove it from the B3 district. Again, my thinking here is that we're trying to create a business district town center that's very pedestrian friendly, very walkable, and that builds what I would consider to be clusters of businesses that enable people to walk from one to the other. And I worry about whether you put a school, which we heard from Highland School District say that the current, I don't know if it's guidelines or if it's their suggestions from the state, are a minimum of like 26 acres. So when you take 26 acres out of town center and you dedicate that to a school, it's a pretty large parcel of space in town center that could potentially break up the remainder of the business district. So that's one of the reasons that I looked at schools and said, well, maybe they don't belong in town center. They belong in the other areas. And also remember that schools are also conditional within the residential districts. So there's a lot of other places for schools within Hinckley outside of the town center. What are your thoughts on that one?
Remember that the schools are public schools. You could have private schools, be they church or something else, and wouldn't be subject to that 23 acres
Correct.
that the state requires of the public buildings that they theoretically help finance.
Right. Or charter schools. All of those are possible.
Charter schools, yes, number of different kinds.
I feel like having a school there for so many years, I think actually kind of fostered more of a walkable, enjoyable town center.
It certainly provided parking for activities within town center as well. That's
Exactly.
something to consider.
Exactly.
So you would prefer possibly maintaining schools as a conditional use within town center?
I would.
Okay. Daycares and child centers. I thought that fell very, it was very similar to schools. And so I removed that one too, but based upon the discussion, it seems like more, it keeps dropping down this ribbon every time I go to reject a change. It sounds like conditional use for daycare centers also within town center. Am I understanding correctly where people are leaning?
I am. I don't know if anyone else is.
For whatever reason, in my mind, I think they're different, but I'm one of five. So,
Which let me ask you, why would you not want them in town center, I guess?
Because when I see honestly, it's when I see the adult portion, I'm seeing something more institutional as opposed to okay, I'm going to drop my kids off, go to work kind of daycare center. I'm seeing more of a managed care facility. And I don't know if that's town center or not.
Well, so this is day. So it would not, if it was a managed care, it would only be a managed care that handles day facility, right? It would not be an overnight facility.
Correct. But there are a lot of overnight facilities that then send their adult patrons to daycare facilities. And I've had negative interactions, negative occurrences at those locations. A lot of times they are severely understaffed, and it leads to significant safety issues, especially with 303. That I'm thinking specifically about where the school currently stands. With 303 right there, I would be concerned about that as an adult daycare.
I understand that point. What I would say is that that's also a possibility, particularly with some charter schools, right? Charter schools don't have the same staffing requirements. So it's a possibility. I don't know. Mr. Spellman, what's your thoughts on it?
I don't see issue with it.
Keeping it as conditional?
Keeping it, yeah, as conditional. Right. Give the BCA the powers to put their appropriate conditions around it, take into consideration some of the safety type items.
Mr. Manley, are you in? Okay. Again, this is just tentative as we work through this section. And then my hope is at the next meeting, I'll provide before the next meeting, probably within the next 2 weeks. My hope is that I'll compile all of this together. I'll send you guys a full draft with full revisions throughout the zoning code. We're also going to meet to discuss additional changes that just are cleanup items that we want to take care of as part of the township's review of fees. And so we'll send all this to you at one time. I'm just trying to get an overview of where our heads are so I know where to move on this. The next one I highlighted, although I kept it as conditional within all of the districts, is assembly halls, meeting places, charitable, social, and other organizations. The reason I flagged this one is the same reason I flagged schools and daycare centers. I think that they have the opportunity or the possibility of being larger facilities. And so I absolutely think that the assembly hall meeting place fits within our goals for town center as outlined in the comprehensive plan. But I wanted to flag it just because it was something that has the potential for large buildings. Everyone's okay with keeping it conditional? I think based upon every other discussion, it seems like it'd be logical. Okay. Outdoor recreation, we briefly spoke about. Indoor recreation, conditional across all three of them. Still, I don't see any issues with that. Outdoor recreation, based upon tonight's discussion, it seems like we would like outdoor recreation conditional within the B1 and the B3 districts. I'm not sure why we would not want a conditional within the B2 district if we're allowing within the B3, which I consider to be the more restrictive location. But
What did we decide on Buzzards Cove? B2?
we're leaning towards B3,
Oh, B3.
which is why we moved outdoor recreation to B3.
And you were suggesting adding it into the B2.
Right. I just don't know why it would not be permitted within the B2 district if it's permitted within the B3 district. You know, when I think about outdoor recreation, I think of the possibility of outdoor lighting, which again would be a reason that you'd want to potentially not have it in town center where you're closer to residential. but B2 is also relatively close to residential, depending on where you're at. So that's something to consider. Noise is another factor. I just don't understand why we would allow outdoor recreation within the B3, but not within the B2. As a conditional use, I shouldn't say allow.
I'm with you. I don't see why. I think it should be. I think it should be allowed if it's in B1 and B3.
What are gun ranges? Would that be outdoor recreation?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that.
It's a great question.
I think it absolutely would be.
And that's, I just thought of that one, but I'm thinking of things that could generate a lot of loud noises. And because we always, outdoor recreation, you
Isn't
think
there
of
a gun
noise
range
and
across the
lights.
street?
Hmm?
Isn't there a gun range across the street? Doesn't he have shooting across the street?
The police gun range.
I thought attached to the building, the hunting building. Isn't there a range there?
Not a shooting range.
My office is right here and I've never heard gunshots here. I
That's
hear
why I
them plenty of
said, I
times
know
by my
there's a-
house, but never.
The only
thought there was a
ranges I'm aware of in the township, there's obviously the police range, and then there's another one on West 130th. There's a hunting club between
Ridge, there's one on Ridge.
but that's archery, isn't it?
The one you're talking about, the minimum age there is about 75. That probably, I suspect, next few years will be up for sale. The hound dogs or whatever it is.
I don't. It's right on West 130th.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But the last time,
between Laurel and I want to say Sleepy Hollow.
it's on our side of the road, right?
Yeah.
The last time that we did something in the BZA, which had been 2015, they announced they were only having one thing a year, and it was strictly with dogs. So guns weren't involved anymore. That they hadn't fired a gun in that place, to the best of their knowledge, for the previous two.
Well,
Actually, let me rephrase it. He said they hadn't fired a rifle in there, so maybe there is pistol in there for the last couple of years before that. But that may be a piece of property that might be available in the near future.
This is still conditional, so even
Right.
if we allow it within all three, it does have to go to the BZA, and the BZA could make determinations that a gun range shouldn't go there.
And
I was
it's already there anyhow.
Well, yeah, I was just saying,
we're
we
thinking
expand
over on
to
Boston
Town
Road.
Center or to Boston. What sorts of recreation could there be that would generate a lot of light pollution or noise pollution? And baseball fields with lights would be one that would have a lot of light pollution. Basketball, could have some noise. Gun range, paintball range, those kind of things
See, all that could be controlled
through BZA.
through BZA.
Correct.
I don't know how you do it, but it's
To limit
subject to BZA. But
to a limited extent, though.
well, okay, we have to turn the lights off at 10 o'clock, for example. In the summer, that's not a big deal. In the winter, 10 o'clock, that's a lot of light. So, in that respect, yes, I agree with that.
What outdoor recreation doesn't have noise?
Putt-putt.
Oh, come on.
I'm saying that because that's actually the outdoor recreation that we're worried about here is Buzzards Cove, and you have a driving range, which really doesn't generate too much noise. You hear the golf tee or the putt-putt. And
But
that's
then the
outdoor
House of Horrors, the haunted.
That's not falls within outdoor recreation, though. That falls within a special event.
Mhm.
I'm okay with it staying conditional, letting it go to BZA, but
I think that's the way to go. Then I can cover. They can set the restrictions
Well,
or negotiate them, whatever.
Yeah, but that's kind of part of the problem is when some of the things do go up to them, what we're seeing is that
they don't have anything to lean on.
there's nothing that they can say, no, we don't want that in the township. And then they lose.
Well, if you're talking, they may vote accordingly. That's not here, so therefore, that I won't, but if lose, I don't know if they've had many court cases over that kind of issue in the recent past. If you're going to sit down and restrict it to lights have to be turned off at X hour and noise level has to be low, such and such a thing and such a deal, then don't we run into the issue where the police have to have certain equipment to monitor the lumens, I guess it is, and the sound levels and all that kind of stuff in order to stop the action, as it were. But I know a couple times, not with BZA, but just in general noise things, and the police just didn't have the equipment that they felt would stand up with the prosecutor's office.
I believe that's why the resolution a number of years ago was removed. Inability to monitor it.
What about something like motocross or,
But it needs so much space for, some of these things, baseball fields, motocross.
right, I wasn't thinking about downtown necessarily, but
Well, there's a couple spots where some of that might fit, but it's slowly disappearing.
Yes.
In the we're talking about the B1s. We're not talking about
right.
R1s and 2s.
The other thing is the B1 property and the property up by West 130th are pretty valuable property. So he would have to spend a lot of money to then turn into a motocross, which might not.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you for a 9-month-a-year season or something. It's just like the golf courses are folding; they can't make it. Costs and things in short seasons.
So Marzul, are you still on conditional?
Yeah, I think it has to stay conditional, but I don't know how you could put language in there. Because I think your point's well taken. It'd be nice to have something in there that this is okay, providing
So we can do
proper restrictions are put in, proper conditionals are issued, or something of that nature. I don't know how you would do that.
One of the things that has been talked about before, but at some point we just have to cut off and move forward with some text amendments and then come back and refine further, is light pollution in general. And, there are townships that have standards for what sort of lighting you're permitted to have, the lumens of it, the directions that it can be cast, those kind of things. And so we can certainly work on the lighting side. The noise side is much more difficult because it's so variable. 1 and 2 is difficult to measure.
And how is it enforced?
Exactly. So Ms. Crew, you're okay with conditions?
I'm okay with conditional.
Manly is Spellman, Europe.
Kind of on the fence on this one.
Or you're on the fence
In
between
B3.
taking it out in B3?
Leaving it as is, where it's not permitted, it's not conditional in the current B2, future B3. But that introduces a little bit of an intricacy and something that we already have. That's a B1, the mini golf and whatnot on it. I'm just like, let's if we start allowing everything to be conditional everywhere, what's the real identity of the B3?
Right.
What's the point? Let's just make it all be something.
Right.
But I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. We won't do that. So what's the real intent of what do we want out of downtown area here as a community? What do we want from B3? We
want to encourage pedestrian-oriented retail, office, and service uses with parking located to the side or rear of the buildings to encourage walking and enhance pedestrian realm. Continue to encourage buildings to be developed closer to the street. Enhance and expand the existing pedestrian network in town center. That's our objective that we have in the comprehensive plan. It's very much tailored towards retail office services, and pedestrian friendly.
Did you read that from the comprehensive plan?
I did, page 56.
From the zoning?
56.
On page, I don't know what page this is, 63, we give a slight definition to it as well. To create the Hinckley Town Center District B2 in the vicinity.
63? I have a map on 63.
Oh, this is page 63 of the
Oh,
code.
of the
Page
resolution.
Yeah, 76 if you're looking at
6B1F.
pages, yeah.
Mhm.
Encourage a variety of retail, community, and other and office uses in a compact yet cohesive town center environment. I don't know what, I don't get the identity of that. Like, is this what we're talking?
Right, well, based on what both of you have read, outdoor recreation doesn't really fall into that at all.
Right.
So if we're basing it on what is in the comprehensive plan, then I would say to remove that conditional from it, from the B3.
But now what do you do with Buzzards Cove?
I still think we can put Buzzards Cove within the B2, and if there's concerns about a service station there, we just remove that from the B2 district. I don't really have personally, I don't have concerns about a service station being there because I don't think it's got the infrastructure for a service station. But, you know, that is still more restrictive than what's currently permitted within the currently where it's currently zoned, which is B1.
What was your, if you scroll up, what did you have for automobile service stations?
I just put it as a conditional within the B2. Currently, it's not permitted in the B2. And I had expanded it because I thought that a service station made sense along the West 130th Boston corridor.
I don't know that we need to do that.
That's
Personally, I think there's enough gas stations out there as it is.
that might solve the
Both sides of this township, on at least 3 sides of this township.
and there's one directly across the street from that
There
corner.
is. That's non-conforming.
It's not.
It's
No,
not Hinckley.
It's not Hinckley. The gas station would be across the street from basically
Boston Road,
CVS.
West 130.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When you just said that, I was thinking, never mind.
So remove conditional use for automobile within the B2.
The sticking point for me is that we're still looking at, all right, as these properties become more developed, we're going to have specific development guidelines, the way these buildings need to look, where the parking is going to be, and the overall goal. Would we not want those same requirements on that parcel as it gets developed?
You can make an argument, why wouldn't you want that on any parcel?
Because again, it goes to the Boston Road West 130th area. We're kind of carving that out from what we currently have. But because we don't have those development guidelines right now. But and I believe this is Chairman Fisher's goal, is to put in design requirements and development requirements. This is what your buildings are going to look like. Do we want to impose those same restrictions on Boston Road and West 130th that we're going to have right next door to this building? Or is it okay for CVS to show up and,
I was not thinking that we would impose, at least not right now, design standards on the B2 district. I was only thinking.
No, you're on B3, exactly. And that's where I'm saying, if we move Buzzards Cove back over to B2, now Buzzards Cove isn't subject to those design restrictions, which I believe that if we are going to have design restrictions, they need to be imposed on the current Buzzards Cove B1 as well as right downtown where we are now, because you're saying it's a relatively small property and there are riparian setbacks. Absolutely there are. But if we're going to put in if someone wants to develop that property, they could put in multiple retail stores and make it into a walkable outdoor space. So realistically, if someone wanted to, they could put a small strip center down there. Now, if we don't incorporate those design guidelines, what's it going to look like?
I'd go a step further and say that outside of outdoor recreation, why is that a business district? And why would we want the potential for retail space or, one of these other things going in down there? It just seems slightly out of character.
What that sounds like is, all right, screw it, let's just rezone it R1 and make it legal non-conforming.
It's an option. I mean, if we're that concerned about what could potentially go on there or not, we're going to tailor a business district, a new business district, or an existing business district, tailor it specifically to work around what we do or don't want in that particular parcel.
I think it would be, I think to rezone it from B1 to R2 could certainly open the township up
In what
in a taking.
Pardon me?
A taking of the value. That would be my concern if we were to go from B1 to R1.
I mean, I'm not advocating that. I'm not suggesting. I'm throwing ideas.
No, I understand that. And that's kind of the point of the board, is to look at all the different facets of it.
Yeah.
But I also believe that if we are going to look at this, we don't want it to just be developed. I mean, do we want and you could easily fit a strip center in there, even with the riparian setbacks, just because I mean, the homes next to it are also B1, all the way to the edge of that property. So I believe there's
6 lots.
six lots that go along 606. It's a pretty big chunk of property when you think about it.
Do we know how many acres that is? Ish.
I think Buzzard's.
If I were to guess,
and then I would say it's around 8.
I have them here.
Mr. Pearl sounds like he's got it.
Buzzard Cove is on 9.7 plus 1.2. There's 2 lots. Next to that is 0.54 going up Hinckley Hills Road. Next to that is 2.25. Next to that is 2.26. And then there's one more that is 0.6. Many of those lots are substandard and do not meet the B1 lot size.
So really, we're looking at about 17 acres that if someone had the capital, could certainly come in, buy them, raise them, and easily put in a strip center. And so, I mean, if that's a capability, we need to consider, all right, what do we want it to look like? Do we want it to be a strip center that we're going to see in Brunswick or North Royalton or anywhere else? Or do we want it to look like Hinckley would want it to look? And that's why I'm saying let's move it into B3 if we're going to do anything with it.
There's no sewer and water over there, is there? Everything is going to be controlled in development with strip malls or whatever, with sewer and water.
Seems to be a common theme that we hear, but we have Foster's that doesn't have water. We've got Binky Commons. We've got Minnehaha. We've got everything downtown that doesn't currently have sewer and water.
They have their own package plants. I agree with that. But these are small businesses, really. Now, Foster's is in a class by itself because they can have wall-to-wall people in there on a but talking about all the businesses there, they just have a handful of people. Minnehaha, they're out on the road, doing things, so there's not many people inside. S&S the same way. They meet in the morning and they're out working and back at 5 and so on and so forth. So there's not a lot of activity at the shop. But
School probably used a lot of water.
boy, but do they ever?
A lot of electricity.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of people using the restroom too.
But if I owned a business, I wouldn't expect the government to be kicking money. That's tax money, and there's no end to that as far as they're concerned.
And how did the tax money affect their septic system or their water supply?
Well, there's a cost involved that had to be paid. It has to be paid. Originally, it had to be installed. Paid.
No, I'm talking about the school right here that was used for 80 years.
Well, see, I don't know much about the water, but the sewer package plant, which of course they had service with constantly, as you're probably aware. But the water, I'm really not. I know when we did the pancake breakfast and things, at least a few years I was involved there before we moved down. Most of the drinking water we brought in to make pancakes and stuff. When I say we, the chamber brought in because they didn't feel the water was up to the quality that they wanted.
I did that when I was working.
They are also, as a reminder, right down the street in Granger, they are putting in a new strip shopping center. And they don't have the water and sewer.
Where is that at?
Right across from the soccer field.
Across
Across from Granger Town Hall.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
What's going on? That's what I know now.
Yeah.
They've had the parking area.
So I think I don't see the water and sewer as an insurmountable
No, I do.
task to put in a strip center.
I don't totally disagree, but it's a cost that somebody's going to take into consideration. And
So what, I guess, where do you want to go with this in terms of, it sounds like you want to put this current B1 in the B3 district. So then are you advocating for conditional use within the B3 district for outdoor recreation?
Honestly, I really don't have a dog in the fight on that one. Like if it's conditional, it's conditional. If we say no, then it's legal non-conforming. And I know that's not the goal. We don't want to create that. I don't know how we end up with more outdoor recreation in the footprint we currently have as the town center, excluding Boston West 130th. I mean, where are we?
Center? What about behind the Historical Society? All of that's undeveloped B business district.
And I'm looking at it as, all right, it's currently owned, people are using it, whether it's whether it's a residence or
one district as well.
Yeah.
Only at least in the B1 district that you're referring to, there's people actually living in those homes, and this is
but there is one very large parcel that could be.
So the
you're right. There absolutely is there. So then I guess I'd be, if I'm gun to my head, I'd probably say, all right, keep Buzzards Cove or move that over to B3 and just make it legal non-conforming.
I personally really strongly dislike creating legal non-conforming. That's been one of our objectives for the past couple of years, is doing anything that's legal non-conforming. I understand that there might be some justification here But again, from a business usage, when I look at that one parcel is very well suited for outdoor recreation. And on top of that, it's right next to a park.
So you're saying not putting it in B3?
I'm not saying that one or the other. I'm saying either put it in B3 and make that outdoor recreation conditional within B3, or put it within B2 and have conditional within B2. But what I don't think we should do is make it a legal non-conforming.
Okay, I'm fine with having a B3 and a conditional for the B3 district.
Michelle, has any of this changed your
Mhm.
So you're still no for conditional within the B3. Is that right?
No, I said I was for the conditional for the
Oh, you are
B3,
for the
yeah.
conditional. Okay. I thought you'd
For the
changed that,
outdoor,
sorry.
no.
Okay. Mr. Spellman, good.
I think to move forward, I would be, say, put it as conditional.
What are your misgivings about it?
I'm
Just
just
out of
giving,
curiosity.
it's trying to figure out what the identity is. What does this township truly want out of a district that's a B3, Business 3 district, a historic town center, right? And I am not opposed to outdoor recreation. I'm a huge fan of outdoor recreation, but within a Hinckley town center, within the town center here, I just don't know that it fits what the prior direction was, the kind of prior vision of what this section was going to be or should be. I'm not saying right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just that's weighing in the back of my mind. Like I don't like.
So part of me actually kind of likes the idea of like an ice cream shop with a basketball hoop and kids actually wanting to come down and be in town center.
I like the park aspect of it. It's
Agreed.
a park, downtown, green space. So when I think of outdoor recreation, and yes, there's gun ranges, I guess. There's soccer fields, or there are all those things, but they're still green and there's space. They're massive.
Yeah.
So I like the thought of outdoor parks, recreation. When I see the word recreation, I kind of look at a park.
And I like that too, but what I don't like is seeing huge swaths of land between retail shops that you can't walk through it. So, if it was a single basketball court within downtown Hinckley, great, no problem. But if you stretch it out and you have a big recreational facility within downtown Hinckley, then it maybe takes away from the pedestrian and retail space that you're looking at.
So part of me is also looking at this with a business background. And I mean, honestly, to use any of this space for outdoor recreation and make it profitable, it's be super difficult.
I mean, you're seeing how the others go. So
Yeah. And that's a much larger space than what's currently available downtown. So, I mean, well, now that I think about it, maybe hatchet throwing, that's kind of hot now.
It is.
But I mean, like, what's that?
That's indoor, right?
It can also be outdoor. So, I mean, something like that, it could be hot for, it'll probably be hot for a few years and then die.
And I don't know, I'm starting to think of people donating their property to a park to be used as, green space. It's outdoor recreation. I mean, this is...
I would hope that if anyone's donating property, particularly that's not zoned B1 right now, it would stay residential anyway, which is also a conditional use for a park. So
but
I don't know how applicable that is to the business district.
right.
Possibly.
So even like our corner, the park across the street, if it was a little bit bigger or, had walking paths or things of that sort and expanded, I don't know, I like the idea of the outdoor recreation in the town center. It's not, I can't vision what you're saying about the parking spaces, and because every place that I know where there's a park or something, everything is within walking distance, but there's a park. I mean, go downtown to Cleveland. look at the park in the center of the square that they made, it's a hike from one side to the other side, but it's still a nice park. So
I highly doubt we end up with a park in downtown Hinckley.
well, we already have one.
Exactly. We've got the Metro
We already
Park.
have
So-
one.
Well, and we have the Memorial Park, but I don't see any of the businesses that currently exist turning into a park.
I don't either. That's why I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's costly for, it'd be very expensive
Yeah.
for anyone to run an outdoor recreation thing in a business area.
Okay.
Unless you have a very profitable, the baseball things, what they
Batting
do.
cages.
Yeah, the batting cage. I mean, unless you have something that you can do 12 months of the year, it's not
Which is
going to
indoor
work.
anyway. So
Right, indoor. And so are the new bike things, the bike, that one's indoor too. So,
So I think for the sake of moving on, we'll, at least for now, should we put outdoor recreation with all three then? Or, go ahead.
For the temporary, I'd agree with that. And can move on.
So we'll do that. And again, we'll revisit this when we go through our final revisions prior to submission. So there we go for that. Next up is dwelling units, hospitals, senior citizen residential facilities. I've made some suggested changes to all of these. For the dwelling units, if you recall above the first floor, we allow dwelling units in the B2 district. I've suggested striking from the B2 district and continuing it in the B3 district, which would allow for dwelling units still above the first floor in town center, but not along the West 130th corridor. I don't think that there are any dwelling units on any of the businesses along the West 130th corridor. So we can strike it from that. And also it continues to allow for the apartments that we see across the way. There's several of them now within town center. Hospitals, medicals, clinics, and urgent cares. Again, given our goal of this pedestrian-friendly retail shops and services, I suggest striking it as a conditional use within town center. And same with senior citizen residential facilities, striking it as a permitted or a conditional use within the town center. Again, focusing on these small retail shops and services and pedestrian-friendly walking paths and not large complexes like you might see with a hospital and a senior citizen facility.
Something went wrong. Please try again.
Siri disagrees. You don't like this.
and it's on
Apparently
silent
she
too. I don't know what
disagrees
you
with
did.
She disagrees.
I hope we placed a big order here.
Does anyone have any thoughts on this?
No, I don't. Makes sense.
No.
Makes sense to me too.
Mr. Marzullo?
It certainly seems logical.
Good. And then I think that that's it. The rest of it was similar use findings permitted within all three districts. So those are the only changes that I've recommended and I think for the most part, we're in agreement. We still have to figure out what to do with outdoor recreation, but I think mostly in agreement with that. And then the next step will be considering a rezoning of the B2 within town center to B3 and also the B1 within over by Buzzards Cove B3. And the rest will remain as is. My suggestion for now, unless we want to, again, review design standards, would be to move over everything that's all of the code sections that pertain to the B2 and clone them for the B3. So we have the same parking restrictions, same setback requirements, same buildable lot sizes, everything is the same across those two districts. And then that can be refined over time as we continue to work through the code. Any other thoughts on that portion of what I think the process should be?
Do we need to, I don't know that we need to clone it per se, more just reference.
Right.
Yeah. And then you have your matrix.
Right.
Right. Let's leave it the same.
Mr. Marzullo, anything else?
Just looking through.
So while you're looking through it, I'll move on to the next topic, which we've already had some discussion on, and I think which ties into this, and that's architecture design standards, particularly for town center. It's something that the current comprehensive plan has suggested that we do. I think it makes sense for town center if we want to continue to preserve what I consider to be the heart of Hinckley and town center. I've sent you a couple zoning regulations. They're all over the board with what types of design standards they have. I spoke to Olmsted Township, a member of I think it was their building department today, to understand how their architecture review process went. And he said, to be honest, really our architecture, while we have some suggestions, they don't have too many teeth to them. But what we've had is dialogue with developers as they developed, and we made suggestions, and they seem to be agreeable on it. But we are currently working with a zoning attorney to consider tightening up our design standards as well in Olmsted Township, because they want to make sure that they have more teeth to their design standards. In contrast, at Boardman, which is another, township, has pretty significant design standards for multi-tenant buildings and also for non-residential buildings. They've got like 9 or 10 pages of them that break down everything to the facade of the building. And so we could go along that path. One thing that I will say is that I think if we want to have more regulations as opposed to less, if we want something that has teeth as opposed to suggestive, we might want to bring on some outside consultant to help us draft those, or because that's a significant chapter addition to the book pertaining to design standards. And go ahead.
We have to be able to justify the health, welfare, and safety
Correct. Now,
portion of the state regulation as we do this.
and that's partially why I'm leaning towards a consultant on this. What I will say is that the state has granted architecture review committees for townships. So they have given us that option to do that, even though design, you think of not for the health, general welfare, and safety of residents. They are allowing architecture review within townships, and there are some that have it. But I agree with you that we're threading a fine needle there, and we might want to bring on someone to help us with that has more knowledge of what those design standards are.
I agree completely. I agree completely. To approach the town trustees and ask to hire someone to sit with us at some point in time.
And I really think, so to that end, the next question is, do we want to move forward with text amendments with what we have so far with respect to the rezoning, revisit potentially short-term if that's something that we want to talk about, clean up the solar panel energy topic, and also do some cleanup of the book that I'm currently working on with the zoning department, and move forward with that text amendment without design standards? Or do we want to table all of this, move forward with design standards, and then send a package up once we have design standards in place as well?
I'd prefer to move forward without the design standards, because I think that's going to take
I think it's going to take at least
some
4
time.
months.
It could take a year.
We're going to need several work sessions for that.
Yeah, so I think moving forward with what's there to
Okay,
get that out of the way.
Get it done. Mhm.
I'm good with that. So then, again, what we'll do at the next meeting is prior to the next meeting, hopefully in 2 weeks, because we're having a meeting next week where we're going to work through some of this. Within 2 weeks, I'm hoping to have you guys a full revision of the resolution with track changes turned on, so that you will have enough time to review it for a couple of weeks. Come into the next meeting, we can fine tune it, and then we can either make a motion at the next meeting or the subsequent meeting if we still have some items that we need to tweak a little bit, and send it up to Planning Commission for review and get the process started on the text amendment. That seemed like a reasonable objective for us.
Agreed. I agree. Yeah.
Now, the Ohio Revised Code says that we have the opportunity to hire a design consultant. we don't have any funds allocated for that. So what I would like to do is go to the township trustees and say that this commission would like to begin the process of hiring a design consultant. Can we allocate funds for that? Do you think that now would be a good time to start that process? Or do you not even want to start that process until we've moved through this text amendment?
What's the big driver behind this?
Which part?
Having design standards, having a review board of some sort like that. I mean, the code's gone how many decades without it?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I feel like there's a push. So I'm just kind of curious.
I think it's mostly me. But
It's honest.
it is. The comprehensive plan has suggested having design standards in place. And when I look at town center, I worry about, one, how our current resolution is being enforced, and two, as we move forward in the next 20 years, I can see a substantial redevelopment of town center and a revitalization of it in some sort. And I want to make sure that we're continuing to protect the character of this town center. And that's what's really driving me towards favoring some level of design standards to protect it and to have some more review process over what sorts of buildings are coming into town center, what they look like, just making sure that we don't lose what we have within town center as some of the undeveloped property becomes developed, and or as they start to do renovations on the existing properties. So that's where I've fallen on this. We don't have to do the design standards, but that's why I've been working this year towards moving us in that direction.
And the outside consultant to bring them in is to help to guide us through this process and to set those standards, or is it to also have, because I vaguely remember ORC on this from years ago, but I think you could even have an outside member sit, an expert, if you will, sit on that board.
So that's a great question. So the township can actually set up a separate commission, architecture review committee, and they could have an outside expert, I think, be involved in that process, or they can turn it over to the commission, which is at least initially what I would recommend we do, because there's not too much transition happening. So my goal would be to have the design consultant help us set these up.
Okay.
And then let us continue to work through them and see how they work and continue to revise them. But I don't see a need for a separate consultant for review on each item. And I also don't see the need for a separate commission to do the reviews process. I think it could be handled by us. Disagree with that, agree with that, really don't.
Indifferent to it. Do we have any idea of what sort of costs are associated to this?
No, that would be the township trustees as part of the process would have to.
But they'd have to put it out to bid somehow.
Right, they would have to,
Or
the standards, they would have to go through the allocation process. My goal is to potentially, depending on whether we want to do it tonight or we want to push the design standards for another time, have a motion that says we want this, and say that it's pending an allocation by the trustees of funding, and then they'll have to work through what that funding looks like, and we'll have to work through what the parameters of that would be moving forward.
I think it's something to explore. Personally, I'd like to see what the costs are before the township commits to anything on that, and then weigh that cost with, what's the importance of it now versus is that something a year down the road, 2 years, 10 years?
Do you want to start figuring that out now, or do you want to wait till after we move through the text? Do you have a preference?
I think we should move with the text amendment stuff in parallel,
Okay.
or separately. This will take a while.
Right.
Would be my.
I didn't know if you wanted to get the ball started now on that, or you wanted to delay that altogether. But it sounds like you're okay with getting the ball started. And I think it makes sense as well, so that at least we're into that 1 year process or whatever the.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's worth exploring and understanding. I mean, that's a pretty big endeavor. I'm just kind of curious if, like, in your conversations, or even if you still have that point of contact at Olmsted Township or Boardman, whomever you've talked with, if they are willing to share, how they approached it and, the lessons learned, costs, things like that.
I have not spoken to Boardman Township. I will do that. As I said, Olmsted Township, their architecture review standards aren't very tight right now, and that's why they're going through this process again right now. So they probably don't have too much, other than they might know. We could at least talk to them about who they're using and how that process is working with respect to them and what sort of parameters they're setting, if they've done that yet, so we can get a better understanding of what we should set.
I found a township somewhere near Columbus, and the design standards were very tight and I mean, very detailed. It's on my computer at home, but it would be interesting to find out why they came up with these very tight restrictions for their designs. I mean, the pictures of the brick and the stone and the doors and the windows. I mean, they had everything in there. So, maybe I can reach out to them and ask them some questions.
Love it.
And costs. Okay.
So trustees, do you think that we should have a motion at this time to request allocation, or do you want to explore costs first? What do you think would be the best way?
I think it would be smart for us to explore costs for at least a month. You do your due diligence, maybe contact some people, and I will do some due diligence and contact some people. And then when we come to the board
People we just
of trustees, we have numbers that coincide.
Perfect. So I think that concludes what I had on the agenda for tonight. Our next regular zoning commission meeting is August 4th at 2022 at 7 p.m. There were two items that I sent to you today. They just came in from Denise Testa over at Planning Services on behalf of the Planning Commission that will be reviewing the reserve at Pine Valley final plat review. That is the subdivision that is already phase 1A of the subdivision is already under development in the R2 district, and they will be beginning the second portion of phase 1B soon. And so they're going for the final plat review for the Planning Commission. So they emailed today and asked if there were any comments. So I imagine that you have not had the time to review that yet. But if you do have any comments, please send them to Suzanne independently, and then we'll compile them. I have a deadline of next Wednesday to submit comments. So if you can do it by Monday, that would be great. So I have a little bit of time. There is nothing that jumped out at me on that. Again, it's a final plat review. Inspector Wilson, I don't know.
Yeah, we just got it in today too, and just a quick glance, it hasn't changed from the final site plan we did. It, like say, it's phase 1B instead of phase 2. But
Now, I don't think that we've done final site plan. I looked today on our minutes, and we've done preliminary site plan, and it looks like we did final site plan of phase 1A. But the maps that they presented were phase 1A. So I think we're still going to have to do a phase 1B. But again, I didn't get this till late but I looked through what our minutes were and what the attachments we received. I think we did phase 1 final site plan, so we will have to probably do that still. The other plan that's coming before the the Planning Commission is the Stoney Hill preliminary plan review. We discussed last time a concept plan. This is for, if you remember, there were two subdivisions that basically abutted one another in the rear. The one being the Pine Valley and the other one being Stoney Hill. Stoney Hill is an R1 district. Pine Valley is an R2. I think Stoney Hill has about 25 lots or something like that. It will have public water and septic systems in lots. Looks to be a gorgeous development. I think that they're filling a part of a pond and building a road over it. So we'll see what happens with that. And then there's also, I think, a significant number of riparian setbacks and wetlands on the property. So we'll have to see what they do with that.
Did they move the drive?
Yes. If you remember, the
drive was on the curve.
It was on the curve. They moved it pretty significantly down from the curve.
Okay.
So it's a much better layout than it previously was. But again, I know that this just came to you this afternoon. It just came to us as well. So if you have any comments on that, just email them to Suzanne, and then we can compile them and send comments if there are any for that site as well. Good. The final thing is Martha Catherwood indicated that we will receive a payment on July 19th. So just expect that through direct deposit sometime there. And she asked me to convey that to you. So that's all that I
Send it
have.
all in one place.
Ice cream.
Okay. A nice cream cake.
I have nothing else. So Ms. Crew, any comments?
No comments.
No? Mr. Marzullo?
No, not right now.
Mr. Manley?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Spellman?
Nothing today. Thank you.
Perfect. Ms. Engelman?
Okay.
Perfect. Trustees?
Mr. Wilson has, I think, some things he wanted to talk about.
Okay.
I'm good.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, I just wanted to update you on two of the current projects, the senior housing there. Right now, they're putting in their stormwater system. If you go by there, you'll see the big squares and so forth. And once they get that in, then they're going to begin bringing in permit applications for the buildings. There's a total of 20 buildings. And I think there's also a rec center, so maybe there's like 21 buildings. And we've requested permits for each building as they come in so we can make sure they have all of the paperwork with the county. And I expect those pretty soon. And then Serenity Court, that's the 60 acres up the street here. And
Across from Arborcrest.
across from Arborcrest. And I got a call from them a couple of days ago, and they said that ODOT has said they can't put their street in off the center road. And so they're appealing that decision. They're in Columbus either today or tomorrow. They would like to come off the center rather than Don Prix. And so they said they'd keep us updated on that as they go through this appeal. And as soon as we find out, I can send you the latest on it.
Didn't ODOT deny the family who wanted to put a circular drive, like that extra drive coming out on 303 too? You know, the guy who has all the brick stone and Kyle Hyde in his yard, he was going to do a circular drive onto 303.
I don't know.
And I believe
What-
ODOT said he
What
could
was
not
your
do
question?
that.
Yes, he was denied. That's
He was
a number of
denied.
years ago, and he chose not to fight it.
Yeah,
He apparently had, at least I heard, he had somebody to buy the stones, but the deal fell through, and that's why they're sitting there. And have been sitting there for what, 5 years, 6 years?
yeah. But I'm just saying that they were
Breaking his
also
driveway.
denied
That's part of
for
rural
that
Hinckley.
303 access.
Well, we've run into that a lot lately with ODOT and people wanting to build houses. But of course, this is a street, so this is, you know,
Right,
a different
it's more.
ballgame.
Mhm. Right. And it is out a difficult area too, because you've got Arborcrest, and then you have Stony Hill. you
With
have-
the traffic signal now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Anyone from the public?
And then right off the street from the senior housing.
No?
Yeah.
I just had a question.
Yeah. Sorry, we have to record it. We have to get your name, your address.
Heidi Goodvine, 1530 Mattingly Road. I don't understand how the process works. I sent an email to all of you, and am I going to get a response to my concern, or was it unimportant? Or, I mean, I didn't hear back from anybody, and I thought it might be discussed this evening.
Thank you for raising it. So that is, you would raise the issue of short-term housing.
Mhm.
And so we had provided some language prior to, we've worked on some language for probably 4 or 5 months. And then ultimately we decided to table that in part because the Ohio legislator is moving through legislation that will take
563.
correct, that will take the option away from the townships to move forward. So we don't necessarily want to put anything on our books that's immediately going to be removed from the books. So we're waiting to see what happens with that.
Didn't they get scrapped in committee?
No, it didn't. It passed through there, but I mean, I have a bunch of paperwork here. I mean, mayors and other people who are against this bill.
I
mean,
Ohio Township Association, I think.
Yeah, that, right. And I mean, the one woman who's for it, a proponent, she has an Airbnb up in Geneva on the lake.
Right.
So that's a little bit, to me, a conflict of interest, although she said she had legal and it said it isn't. I just feel that things move so slowly, and like with Redwood Falls and the things that happen, by the time we get things on the books, the verbiage that, you know, what you're working on now, things happen and it's too late. And that particular Airbnb, we've heard noises for about a year now. And I thought it was a group of, I'm ethnic, but a group of ethnic people just hanging out and getting crazy. And my son pointed out, he saw it online, that it's advertised to host your event. Isn't there a line between, you know, a couple coming in and hosting? There was a graduation party up there. If it were my neighbor's kids, fine. We all put up with that. But for someone to have that ability to come into our neighborhood, I didn't sign up for that when we moved here 25 years ago. We moved to a residential, rural bedroom community. And now, and I hear always the rights of the builders, the rights of the new people who move in. Well, what about the rights of those of us who moved here because we love it the way it is?
I'm lost. What B&B are you speaking of?
It's on Mattingly Road, 1396.
You did receive this email.
Yeah,
Didn't
I
you
sent it to
receive all the pictures and everything?
There were pictures.
I probably did receive
It's
it,
like a log
but
cabin type home.
I
The
probably,
pictures.
yeah.
Yeah, and then there's another one not far from me. Susan Bradley, the realtor, has one on River. You know, and I just think, I remember having these discussions maybe like last winter. We were talking about, you know,
We had these discussions all the way through, I think, April of this year.
Mhm.
We finally decided, well, we'll just hold this because, you know, there was a lot of there was disagreement within the commission as to what we wanted where. And then also we had this pending legislative action that looked like it was going to take it away. So rather than continue to stall on that, we decided to move forward on other items that we thought we would have more ability to move forward with more rapidly. I think that's a good point. You know, I could put that in the proposed amendments and you could review it again. It's just, is that something that you want to do right now? Do you want to hold off on that and move through without short term? Because we still have the language that we discussed in April.
I say hold off on it. Don't muddy it. That's everything else we've discussed up till now, plus some of the other things we're going to look at aren't all that contentious. I think that one's
More.
I don't want to say contentious, but it needs to be well thought through.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Pro.
Richard Pearl, 1785 King Road. As the Buzzard Cove discussion continues, I'd like you to go back for a minute and think about what was the spirit of the 1952 trustees that I believe with the first zoning code set aside 16 acres, 6 lots near the Metro Park. And I that can go unanswered. That's sort of a rhetorical question. I mean, 16 acres is a lot for ice cream, which was all that was ever there up until the late 80s. And then go back to your zoning commission minutes from last August and last July. I think Marcus and Mr. Mazzullo were on the zoning commission at that time. But you were then discussing a B3 district, not to be confused with today's B3 discussion, but you were then discussing a B3 district by Hinckley Lake. And then my final question is, or my question really is, would a new B4 district work for just the Buzzard Cove corner of 16 acres? Is there some resistance to B4 district or a completely new district, since that is completely different from any of these other business districts, whether they're light, town center, or the B2. Any response?
What month was it?
Last August and July, but if you go back to the minutes. I don't know which meeting. Well, I guess.
That's okay.
Okay.
So
I guess there's only one meeting in each of those months.
August there were two, the 12th and the 5th, because I had to look at the minutes today for that.
Oh, okay.
But my only hang up is I don't want to create too many zones that have a bunch of varying regulations that we have to deal with. And so, whether it be we group town center and the West 130th group together or group these two, I was just trying to, we're already expanding to one. Do we really want to continue to expand to yet another just for what is currently the Buzzards Cove property, essentially? And so that's where I was looking at it and saying, I don't know how many different businesses you want to create when each of these zones is relatively small in relation to when you look at a lot of other townships and how they have zones designated. So that's where my head was.
Well, you were considering it last year.
I was never considering.
I think he means we were considering it.
The commission.
Separate.
There was some discussion of a B3 district
Right.
by Hinckley Lake,
And it would just.
but it never continued on.
Right. I do recall that.
Okay.
And that might answer some of our concerns. That might be the answer. I don't know.
No, I agree that this town center is surrounded by R1, I believe. I think that's a correct statement. But that's an unusual 16 acres that is definitely surrounded by R1. We went through this with the screen park and everything. But is that a solution for, I know, and I understand you want to limit the number of business districts, but could that be a solution to properly allow that area to develop or not develop?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I'd like to know what the intent of the trustees at that time was, and for that area. To me, it seems just out of place.
Well, I don't think you're going to find anything. The zoning code then was 2 pages folded in half.
Are you? I'm looking at the 1950 right now, and there wasn't even a business there. Could be. I know at some point.
But it was set up, and if you go to Suzanne, she'll tell you there was an ice cream shop there perhaps in the late 40s.
Because there used to be a lot of small zoned areas, right? There used to be a gas station. The gas station's still there, but it's like a garage at this point. But there used to be, when you looked, a bunch of small specks basically of business districts. And then they've kind of brought those together and consolidated and removed a lot of them. But I was just interested because I actually looked at the 50 map and I was curious. So I just pulled it up. But I think that, it's certainly a possibility. Is it something that, I'm okay with whatever. So if we want to explore that and table moving forward with something and do that as well.
And potentially in the interest of reducing the number of and not having a fourth zone, we could just include West 130th and Boston in B3. And then if they want to appeal the design requirements, we would be able to, at the site reviews, say, okay, we can permit it without this specific requirement.
Is that not what we have today with the B2?
Not with design requirements, no.
No, correct, without the design requirements, but everything else is the same between the two.
Between here and the
Town center in West Boston.
Yes.
But then you're saying for Buzzards, maybe I misunderstood.
I'm saying move Buzzards Cove to be the
whatever the other
B3
one
or
is.
whatever we're going to do with it.
Yeah.
And then if we're just going to make I guess a B3 specifically for Buzzards Cove, as Mr. Pearl's talking about, then we can still include here and West 130th and Boston as B2, but then in the design review, we can approve it in that area without.
I just don't know how that section would have any justification at all for imposing design standards. I understand that there would be a mechanism by which you could get a variance, but really your regulations have to have some reference point to why you're doing it. And there's really no reference point to suggest that that should be part of the same design standards as you have for Hinckley Town Center. I think that, to your point earlier, we have a much better reference point with respect to Buzzards Cove and here than we do up there. I would also say that when I look at where development's most likely to occur, I would say that development's actually much more likely to occur up on the B2 district than it is Buzzards Cove. And so I would worry more about what regulations we have up there. So I'm still leaning towards just keeping Buzzards Cove within the B3. And the only holdup was recreation, but everyone has said, look, we don't have a problem with outdoor recreation within the B3 district. So I don't know what we would now be achieving by creating a fourth district, other than removing recreation from town center, but no one had a problem with it. So I don't see how we haven't resolved everything through three districts.
What you achieve is a limitation of what the conditional or permitted uses are going to be on that particular set of parcels in Buzzards Cove. I don't think it's a bad idea. I also think it maybe starts to get into spot zoning, and I'm not sure that's a place we want to go. Again, I'll ask the same question. What was the intent of that area? Was it to open it up to anything that's conditional? Because if it's conditional, right, that whoever wants to develop whatever they want to on there is with the right conditions, put whatever they want on there, provided it's something that we permit or is conditional. And is that what you really want down in that area? And I'm a gamble, so I don't want to say, well, it's odds are they're going to build up here and it's too expensive there, right? That doesn't seem like a good way to zone things.
Mr. Brown, I could be wrong, but check me on history. I suspect that what happened is where there were businesses, they kept the business district. Where there weren't businesses, they didn't. And so that's where you saw.
I'm fairly certain. I know I've heard it in the past. I can't verify.
It was a small little ice cream shop there in somebody's front yard.
Right. And so they zoned
an ice cream.
I believe it was in the 70s when the trustees said, okay, we're going to allow this, and they expanded it and allowed it to become
86
is when it was approved.
Defunct miniature golf course.
Okay.
To what we see today.
Yeah, and then the B1 zone just kind of popped up at that point. It wasn't, I can shoot, that was 40 years ago.
But I don't mean to drag the point. I didn't mean to drag you back into it. Just consider that one way of handling it. I mean, your discussion was already over on it. I didn't mean to.
No. I very much appreciate the different thoughts.
I did want to go back and
newspapers prior to the 60s.
address what Mrs. Gutwein brought up.
And go back.
If I recall correctly, when we tabled it, we had actually more or less agreed on the verbiage and the duration. We even said it was going to be anything less than 30 days was defined as a short-term rental. And if we're going to send up a text amendment,
what we had problems with was whether it was conditional and permitted and where it was conditional and where it was permitted. That was the hang up because there were different members of the commission that wanted different things for that. Some wanted to permit it within the residential, some wanted it within the business. So that was where the holdup was. We were pretty much finished with definitions. And I agree with you, the duration, it was all about where to put this.
I mean, if we're going to send up a text amendment, if it's something that we can knock out in a meeting, as far as like we did tonight, going through and saying, hey, conditional or not, then I think it would be Again, we originally there was opposition to it because it's not a problem. We've never heard about it. And more and more they are popping up on those apps within Hinckley, and with nothing on the books, even whether it's changed at the state level or not. I mean, I feel like this is an opportunity that, hey, we're throwing it up there. Let's just throw it in.
There's nothing time pressing about anything that we covered tonight, so put it on the agenda next month and let's talk about it.
So what I'll do is I'll put it in the text amendment, the whole package thing.
Okay, so
And then we'll divide, when we go through each one of those pages, we'll just decide whether we want to keep it or remove it. And we'll see where the legislation is at that time and go from there. And again, the next step, even after we approve it, is it has to go to planning services, and then it has to go through prosecutors, and then it comes back to us for our final determination before it gets to the trustees. So we could even send it all the way through to planning and then make it a final determination 4 months from now. Go from there. Good. Perfect. Any other comments? All right. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:34 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Spellman, seconded by Manley. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous approval.
You can call my daughter and son-in-law are both doctors, they're both on call